Picture Rome at the height of its power. Marble forums, marching legions, emperors draped in purple. Now strip all of that away. No Colosseum, no Caesar, no empire stretching to the Atlantic. Instead, imagine a cluster of wooden huts on a few hills above a muddy river, surrounded by forests and rival tribes. In that fragile world, long before togas and triumphs, Rome was a kingship, the kind of place where one bad harvest or one bad neighbor could end the story before it really began. Yet, from this precarious beginning, Romans later claimed a line of 7 unforgettable kings arose. Ask a Roman of the late Republic about those kings, and you would not get a cautious historian's shrug. You would get stories, dramatic, polished, and full of omens. Wolves nursing infants, thunderbolts choosing rulers, virtues and vices so exaggerated they seem carved from marble instead of flesh. These are not biographies in the modern sense. They're legends stitched onto a skeleton of memory, tales Romans told about themselves to explain how their city became, in their minds, destined for greatness even before it was fully born. Between myth and archaeology, the kings stand half in shadow, half in certainty. So how do we step into that shadow and look around? We cannot interview Romulus or Numa, cannot rewind time to the 8th century BCE and watch a real coronation on the Palatine Hill. What we have are later authors, Livy, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Plutarch, writing centuries after the fact, blending folk tales, family propaganda, and educated guesswork. We have shards of pottery, traces of early walls, graves on the hilltops. Between them, a picture emerges, not precise, but vivid enough that if we are careful, we can walk with the legendary kings of Rome. Not jurors, but curious, critical guests today. Every Roman schoolchild knew where to begin, with Romulus, the founder whose name echoes the city's own. His story opens not in Rome, but in a royal crisis far away, in Alba Longa. A usurping uncle steals a throne, twins are sentenced to death, and a frightened servant instead sets them adrift on the Tiber. They are washed ashore, saved by a she-wolf, then raised by a humble shepherd. It is fairy tale material, yes, but beneath it lies a simple idea. Rome is born from survivors, not from the safe and comfortable. Its first hero is exile, not heir. Romulus grows up rough, more at home with shepherds than courtiers. When he and his twin Remus discover their royal blood, they overthrow the usurper and look for a place to found their own city. Here, the story darkens. Quarreling over omens and boundaries, Romulus kills Remus beside the first city wall. To later Romans, this was both horrifying and fitting. Their city, they said, was born in blood. It would always be willing to shed more. But Romulus's Rome is also a refuge, an asylum flung open to runaways, debtors, and outcasts. Citizens are desperate men, eager to prove. In myth, that desperation shows up most starkly in the episode of the Sabine women. Rome, full of men, has no wives, no future families. So Romulus invites neighboring peoples to a festival. Then, on a signal, his followers seize the women and drive the stunned fathers and brothers away. It is a brutal story that Roman writers never quite moralize away. Yet they insist the women themselves broker peace, choosing to stay, binding conquerors and conquered into one people. Out of violence, they claimed, Rome learned the art of absorbing its enemies. From Romulus, kingship meant ruling a patchwork. After Romulus vanishes, some say in a storm, others whisper at the hands of angry senators, the Romans in our sources do something striking. They swing from warrior to priest, choosing as their second king not another swaggering warlord, but a pious Sabine named Numa Pompilius. Where Romulus built walls and took women by force, Numa builds altars, temples, and habits. The contrast could not be clearer. If one king explains Rome's hunger and hardness, the next explains its obsession with ritual, law, and the favor of the gods. Where Romulus seized power with the sword, Numa tames it with the calendar. According to tradition, Numa refuses the throne until persuaded that the gods approve. He summons the nymph Egeria to advise him in secret groves, receiving, Romans liked to imagine, divine blueprints for their sacred offices. Under Numa, the Vestal Virgins gain formal guardianship of the eternal flame. The major priestly colleges take shape. The chaotic lunar year is regularized so that festivals align, more or less, with the seasons. To later Romans, this peaceful king explains why their city, so fierce in war, was also bound by oaths, ceremonies, and a thick web of taboos. Power now marches in step. Seen together, Romulus and Numa form a deliberate pair: sword and sacrifice, conquest and compromise. Roman writers use them like bookends to say, in effect, that their city is great because it knows both how to fight and how to stop fighting. But the pendulum does not stay in the middle. After Numa, tradition swings violently back toward aggression with the third king, Tullus Hostilius, a ruler so bellicose that later storytellers joked he neglected the gods entirely until they struck him down with a thunderbolt. Under Tullus, Rome learns how far ruthlessness can build and how far it can break. In the stories, Tullus kicks off his reign by picking a fight with Alba Longa, the very mother city from which Romulus descended. Rather than send whole armies to bleed each other dry, the two sides agree to a stylized duel: 3 Roman brothers, the Horatii, against 3 Alban brothers, the Curiatii. 2 Romans fall, 3 Albans are wounded, and the lone surviving Horatius uses cunning and stamina to cut them down one by one. Whatever the historical core, the tale taught Romans that their ancestors prized tactical intelligence as much as courage. War under Tullus becomes the stage for ruthlessness. But there is a price to this relentless hardness. Later Romans said that under Tullus the city forgot the careful rituals and scruples Numa had taught. The gods, displeased, sent a plague that ravaged Rome. Only when Tullus panicked and tried to repair his neglect, bungling a sacred ceremony, did Jupiter answer with a lightning bolt that burned the king at his house. Whether you believe the lightning bolt or not, the moral is clear. A Rome of pure aggression, without piety or law, would burn itself out. Enter Ancus Marcius, the so-called good king. He arrives bridging war and law both. Ancus is said to be Numa's grandson, and his portrait in the sources feels almost like an apology for Tullus. He wages wars, yes, and successfully, adding territory along the Tiber, transplanting conquered peoples into Rome to boost its population. But he is also a builder. Under Ancus, tradition assigns the first bridge over the Tiber, the Pons Sublicius, and the foundation of Ostia, Rome's port at the river's mouth. Are these attributions precise? Probably not, but collectively they say this: under the Tarquins, Rome stops being just a hilltop refuge and starts becoming a city of infrastructure and shared public spaces. Kingship pours wealth into stone, spectacle, and the common ground. If Tarquin the Elder embodies foreign influence, his successor, Servius Tullius, embodies social transformation and mystery. Ancient writers couldn't even agree on his origins. Some said he was the son of a slave woman in the royal household, his head once seen wreathed in harmless flames, a sign of destiny. Others whispered he was a captive Latin child or had Etruscan blood. Either way, his story frames him as an outsider who rises through merit and omen, not lineage alone. For a rigidly aristocratic society, that was both unsettling and fascinating. Servius lets Romans imagine change without admitting revolution outright. To Servius, tradition assigns one of the most important structural changes in early Rome, the census and the division of citizens into classes by wealth. Instead of organizing the army purely by clan and bloodline, he supposedly ranks men according to property, arming the richest most heavily, giving them more political weight, but also greater responsibility. The famous Servian constitution, whatever its real date, let later Romans imagine that their unequal republic still rested on a kind of meritocracy. In cross-section, the city now looks less like a tribe and more like a state. Power is being measured and ranked. Servius is also associated, perhaps anachronistically, with the first major circuit of defensive walls around Rome, the so-called Servian Wall. Archaeology shows that by the 6th century BCE, substantial fortifications did indeed rise, enclosing several hills. Whether or not Servius laid each stone, the legend that he did lets Romans credit a king with turning scattered villages into a single walled organism. That achievement makes what happens next feel even more jarring. After a builder king who lifts outsiders and counts citizens, the last king, Tarquin the Proud, will embody everything Romans later claimed to hate about monarchy. His story becomes Rome's warning. Lucius Tarquin Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, is portrayed almost as the negative image of an ideal Roman leader. He allegedly seizes the throne by murdering Servius and tossing his body into the street. He refuses to consult the Senate, rules by fear, and relies heavily on foreign bodyguards. He drives massive building projects with forced labor, including finishing the Great Temple on the Capitoline Hill. Are these attributions precise? Probably not, but collectively they say this: under the Tarquins, Rome stops being just a hilltop refuge and starts becoming a city of infrastructure and shared public spaces.